Hello homeschoolers! Welcome to Science Class. I am Teacher Gwen and join me today as we take a journey into the lungs to see how the respiratory system works to keep us alive and breathing.
For today's learning objectives, first is we need to identify the parts and function of the breathing system. And second is to explain how lungs work. Let's condition your mind with this activity called We Belong Together. All you need to do is to identify the following statement as true or false. First statement, your left and right lung are exactly the same. Is it true or false? Correct answer is false. Second, you can live with one lung. Is it true or false? Correct answer is true. Third one, children and women breathe faster. Is it true or false? Correct answer is true. Last one, humans can inhale and exhale 1,000 liters of air a day. Is it true or false? Correct answer is false. So why do we need to breathe? To keep us alive? Our body needs oxygen. To live? Our cells needs it. To get oxygen? Or to get rid of carbon dioxide. Very good! You got it right! Now let's know more about your lungs and your respiratory system.
But first, let's watch this breaking news update.
January 30, 2020, DOH confirmed the first case of COVID-19 here in the Philippines. Today, 5 months after the first case, we have already reached 70,000 confirmed cases as of July 21, 2020. Severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus 2 or SARS-CoV-2 is a viral infection that affects respiratory tract and can cause lung damage and breathing problems. COVID-19 is a respiratory illness with symptoms that starts like those of any other flu. But everyone was caught unprepared when it was known that COVID-19 is more than an ordinary flu and turned to be highly fatal.
Based on the news report, what system in your body is at risk to COVID-19? Correct! It is your respiratory system. So it is important for us to know the parts and function of your respiratory system.
Respiratory system. System, by definition, consists of different parts, and each part plays an important role. In respiratory system, it consists of lungs and other tubes that allows the exchange of gas within the lungs. And also, it assures that we have steady supply of clean, filtered air in the same way the dust and other particles are filtered. The human breathing system. Here are the parts and function of the respiratory system. First is the nose, the entry point of air inside the respiratory system. Here in the picture, okay, the second picture, notice that inside the hole contains the hair. So we call that one as the nasal hair, and the main function of those hair is to collect the dust and trap the materials out of the body. Okay? Then we call that hole as nostrils. So ano bang tawag dun sa naiipon dyan sa loob? Chat nyo na lang sa akin na. Nasal passages, also known as nasal cavity, is the interior part of the nose, lined with mucous secretion, which forms a physical barrier and provides mechanical protection from the invasion of infectious and allergic pathogens. Now, the main function of the nasal passages is to warm, filter, and moisten the air that we take in. Now, why do we need, or why does this nasal passages needs to warm the air that we intake? It is because our body, or the air that we intake, must have the same temperature with the temperature of our body. Pharynx, a muscular tube in the upper throat, here, and it is a passageway of both food and air. So as you can see in this part, air and food both enters the pharynx. And then the larynx, okay? Larynx located below, okay, below the throat, also known as the voice box, okay, because the vocal cords are stretched across it, and also larynx referred to as the Adam's apple because it protrudes in a man's neck, okay? Now, this hole in here is called the glottis. It is always open except when we swallow. Above the glottis, okay, notice that there is a flap tissue called the epiglottis. Okay, so this one is called the epiglottis that closes the glottis when we swallow to prevent the food from entering the lungs. Okay, so it is a myth to say that someone remembers you whenever you are choked. Okay, blame it on your late epiglottis. So huwag ka nang humingi ng number. The lungs, a large sac-like organ in which the external respiration takes place. We define external respiration as the process of where the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide between the air and blood within the lungs. Remember that the major function of the lungs is to take in oxygen and to expel carbon dioxide, as well as to protect the body from the harmful substances, okay, from the air. And also, the lungs is protected by a double layer membrane called pleura. Okay? So this pleura acts as a lubricant that aids in our breathing. So this is how your lungs look like. Okay? So this one is your right lung and the left lung. Notice the lines that separates them into unit. Okay, this division is called lobes. Okay, your right lung consists of 3 lobes. So we have the superior lobe, okay, and then the middle lobe, and then the inferior lobe. While your left lung consists of 2 lobes only. We have the superior and the inferior lobe. Okay, now how about the size? What have you noticed between the size of this left and right lung? Okay? What have you noticed? Yes, it is
unequal. Unequal because of the space in here, right? So what organ is located in this space? What organ is that? Starts with letter H and ends with letter T. Okay, correct. That is your heart. Okay, very good. It is the heart. The left lung provides a space to accommodate the heart. Okay, so take note that the lungs is the major organ of the respiratory system. Why is that? Remember that within the lungs, it consists of three parts. Okay, we have the bronchi, we have the bronchioles, and of course, the alveoli, which plays the major role in respiration. Okay, what is inside the lungs? Trachea, or also known as the windpipe, a wide hollow tube supported by rings and cartilages which keep it open. So this is your trachea. Okay, let's highlight it first. This is your trachea. Now, this trachea is kept open by incomplete rings of cartilage, which allows us to widen the air when we want to inhale more air. Okay, and then of course, okay, the trachea branches out into tubes. Okay, we have the left and the right bronchi. So here, this one is the right bronchi and you have the left bronchi. Okay, so bronchus, by the way, is the singular form. So the left bronchus enters your left lung and your right bronchus enters the right lung. Okay, so the bronchi continue to divide again, becoming narrower each time until they appear like tiny tubes the size of twig called the bronchioles. Okay, so these are your bronchioles here. Okay, so bronchioles can also be compared into roots. At the end of each bronchioles are hundreds of round air sacs that resemble clusters of grapes in a stem. These air sacs are called the alveoli. Okay, so these are alveoli inflates during inhalation and deflates during exhalation. So what are these alveoli? Alveoli are 100 air sacs that resembles a grape on a stem. Okay, so at the end of each bronchiole, okay, lies a grape-like structure called the alveoli. And as I've mentioned, it plays the major role in the respiratory system because it is where the actual exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide takes place. Okay. Alveoli, by the way, is the plural form and alveolus is the singular form. So this is how the close-up look of your alveoli. Keyword of the day: diffusion. To have a better understanding on how the alveoli work, it is important for us to define this term. Okay? So diffusion is the movement of particles from a more concentrated area to a less concentrated area. Okay? So first, what is that particles all about, or what does it mean? Okay? Particles, okay, let's highlight it first. Particles, these are extremely small constituents of matter that cannot be seen by naked eye. Say for example, particles of oxygen or particles of carbon dioxide. And they move from one concentrated area to a less concentrated area. When we say concentrated, okay, when we say concentrated, many particles are stuck in that certain area. Those particles will move to a less crowded area to occupy the available space. Okay? So take a look at this animation. These dots in here, okay? So these dots in here are concentrated particles, okay? And once they diffuse, okay, they move around, they diffuse, okay? They move to a less concentrated area. Okay? So that means these particles diffuses because they tends to occupy the available space in here. I hope that is clear. So this is your alveolus. Each alveolus has walls surrounded by a capillary which diffuses oxygen into the blood. The white line here represents the alveolar wall. Okay? And inside the alveolus contains concentrated particles of oxygen. While the pathway outside the alveolar wall is known to be the capillary. And capillary is the thinnest kind of blood vessel. Inside the capillary contains red blood cells. So these red squares in here are called red blood cells, and they transport oxygen into the blood. Notice the movement of these oxygen particles inside, which easily passes through the wall because of the process of diffusion. Since oxygen particles are concentrated inside, okay, they diffuse easily to the capillary, which is a less concentrated region. This animation is a clear look of how the oxygen particles and the carbon dioxide particles goes in and out of the alveolus simultaneously. The blue arrow, this one, represents the movement of oxygen particles, while the yellow arrow represents the movement of carbon dioxide. Notice that as the oxygen diffuses, it diffuses to the capillary, the red blood cells turn into red, which signifies that it contains oxygen. The blood then carries the oxygen to the different parts of the body. The blood then carries the oxygen to the different parts of the body. So what will happen next? Cells will then use the oxygen to break down food molecules, then releases carbon dioxide as waste product. Okay? So carbon dioxide will be transported by the blood, which goes into the alveolus. And notice the violet RBCs, okay, in here. Notice the color of the red blood cells here, violet, right? Okay, so that means that it contains carbon dioxide. And that carbon dioxide diffuses into the alveolus. Okay? And from the alveolus, it goes out as carbon dioxide in our lungs. So we inhale oxygen and we exhale carbon dioxide. Let's summarize the parts and function of the respiratory system, starting with the nose. With the two openings called the nostrils, the hair inside the nose traps the dust and dirt particles, and sometimes these trapped particles may irritate the nasal passages and causes us to sneeze. Sneezing expels and helps to prevent these particles from entering the lower part of the respiratory system. Now, next one is the pharynx. Pharynx is the common passageway of both food and air. And, of course, the larynx. Larynx is the voice box, or also known as the vocal cords. So, how does the sound create through our vocal cords?
The air rushing out from the lungs causes the vocal cords to vibrate and create sound. Okay, so nose, nasal passages, larynx, and pharynx are collectively known as the upper respiratory tract. Now, trachea, on the other hand, or the windpipe, act as a vacuum cleaner, and it is the main passageway of oxygen and carbon dioxide in and out of the lungs. Some particles may collect in trachea, causing an irritation. That causes us to cough, and through coughing, we can expel the foreign particles. And lungs, of course, okay, is the major part of the respiratory system. Then we have the bronchi, the left and right bronchus, okay, which continue to divide and become more narrower and appear to be the size of twigs called the bronchioles. Then at the end of each tubes, okay, are 100 round sacs called the alveoli, which is the actual exchange of carbon dioxide and oxygen takes place. Okay, so trachea, bronchi, bronchioles, and alveoli are collectively known as the lower respiratory tract. Another part is the diaphragm, but we will discuss this diaphragm separately. So we will learn more about the parts and function of your diaphragm. Let's sum it up. So we will trace the pathway of oxygen and carbon dioxide as it goes in and out of the lungs. Oxygen in to the nose, then nasal passages, and then the larynx and pharynx, to the trachea, bronchi or your left and right bronchus, and then to the bronchioles, and of course the alveoli. So in the alveoli, it is where the actual exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide takes place. Now, what will happen to the oxygen? The blood will then transport the oxygen to the different parts of the body and to the cells, okay? The body cells. So the oxygen will then be used by the body cells as raw material, and in return, it produces carbon dioxide as byproduct. Okay? Now, what will happen to the carbon dioxide? The carbon dioxide will then return to the blood, transported again by the blood, and then goes into the alveoli, to the bronchioles, bronchi, your trachea, pharynx and larynx, nasal passages, and of course the nose. So we exhale carbon dioxide.
That's it for today. I hope you learned something. I am Teacher Gwen, and join me again next time, and together, let's keep our respiratory system happy and healthy.